Hey, it's Ike coming at you with another episode of Create or Die. Thanks for joining me. Here we are, episode 18. We've got a lot to talk about. But before we get into it, let's do a little housekeeping here. Remember, this is a new podcast. We could use your help, and you know how to do that. You just tell your friends, you tell your family, and you tell that guy that you run into in the halls every once in a while at work, hey, check out Create or Die, the podcast. It can be found on YouTube. It can be found on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and wherever you get your podcasts. That's where you'll find it. And you'll be helping us reach out to more creatives, because we need to stick together. It's hard out there. We got the non-creatives trying to rise up against us and take what's ours, right? You know, I don't really believe that. I mean, like I've said before, even those who aren't creative can be creative. Good ideas can come from anywhere. And that's the creative leader in me speaking, I guess. The diplomatic corporate warrior trying to keep people happy at the workplace version of Ike. And that's what we're going to talk about today. I've had several people ask me, what's it like being a creative director or a head of creative or an art director or guy who does pretty pictures in the corner. Whatever you are as the creative leader at your organization, whether that be in-house or at an agency, it's important to know that there are right ways to do things and maybe not right ways to do things. And I'm not saying that I have all the answers, because I'm always learning. Not just creative stuff. I'm learning about business. I'm learning about marketing. I'm learning about internal politics. I'm learning about you can't be complacent. Lots of stuff. I'm learning about personal brands. How do we build that for ourselves? And hoping to bring a guest on next time around to talk a little bit more about personal brands, because that's an important thing. But for today, I'm just gonna ramble. I'm just gonna share what's worked for me, and you can tell me, hey, you're full of crap. That doesn't work. You've been doing it wrong for close to 20 years. What are you thinking? And I would just say, I've been doing it for close to 20 years. So, this combination of ideas has worked for me to some extent. I fully admit there are things I can be better at. There are things I'm working on. There are things that I was once good at that I've let go by the wayside, and I need to sharpen those skills again and recommit myself. So if you're not learning, if you're not constantly improving, if you think you're just putting it into neutral or cruise control and you're just gonna coast, well, I got bad news for you. There's no such thing. If you ain't climbing, if you ain't accelerating, and I shouldn't use the word ain't, but I like to get casual on this here podcast. But if you're not doing those things, then you're at a standstill, or you're accelerating downward into a blind death spiral or something. Insert crazy metaphor here, right? But yeah, so currently I'm working as an in-house creative. I spent 12 plus years working in the agency world at different design firms, and had my fair share of working with multiple different clients, Fortune 100, 500, all the hundreds you can think of. and that experience in the agency world, I think, has been super beneficial to me as a creative leader in the in-house world, running an internal agency, if you will. And that is why I was hired 5 years ago at my current place of employment. MX is to take this ragtag bunch of creatives and make an agency out of it, not just, do what you felt like when you felt like it. Instead, treat, the stakeholders, the different departments as clients, and, create an intake form and have an SLA with, to set expectations. And that's where I want to start out. The importance of having a service level agreement, written somewhere. And for us currently, that's in our creative brief intake form, which is in CRE8. And you can do something similar in any of your project management tools like Atlassian or Monday or Workday or any of the days. But just putting in there, hey, if you're looking for PDF design, that usually takes, you can expect a 1 week turnaround or whatever, and just make it clear what it is, what's expected. And also realize that, working in-house and dealing with lots of different priorities and lots of different bosses, you're gonna have to bend a little bit. But these are best practices that'll hopefully help mitigate that a little bit. So yeah, set those expectations. And then the intake form or creative brief, you can, in some of these tools, based on the answer they pick, is this digital or for print, it can redirect the stakeholder, the requester, into different set of questions that are more specific. Like, okay, they chose print. All right, what are the dimensions? What are, do you have an idea of what kind of paper or quantity or whatever? And then obviously there's a big kind of description area. Ask for content up front. That's always good. But like I'll talk about later, and I've talked about in previous episodes, when you're dealing with a client, and especially when you're just starting out, you've got to treat the client as something special. I mean, you don't want to lose that client by being hard to work with. So if they come to you with an outline or just a one paragraph idea, be willing to work with them and say, okay, ideally we would have all of the content written out, but I've got some ideas. I can throw in some lorem ipsum here and there to give you a sense of, if we use your outline and put in the titles and a paragraph here and there, and you can get a feel for what this piece of content, this PDF, whatever brochure might look like, and then throw it back over to them. And then sometimes it's easier for them to see it in some type of close to finished form, and then they're able to say, okay, I just need to write one paragraph for this section, rather than just aimlessly thinking they've got to write pages upon pages of copy. So just a quick little aside there. But like I alluded to earlier, having an in-house creative agency assumes that you've got customers. So who are your customers? You've got let's start from the top, the CEO, the C-level people, executives, your department. If you're a creative leader that is the chief creative officer, then you sit up there and maybe report to the CEO, and you don't have to worry about another layer. Like currently I sit on the marketing team and report to the head of marketing. And, as far as I'm concerned, that's my number one client, and I need to make sure to put priority on that person's requests over anyone else's, except in those rare cases where the CEO or another executive comes to you directly with an urgent project. And then still, it's a good idea to keep your boss informed, or your prime client, because if you were working at an agency, you know when there are times when you can talk to another one of your clients. Maybe they're not they're a consistent client, but they're not like that next level client like a CEO would be in-house. So you might explain to them, hey, we need a little bit more time on this thing you asked for. We got this big opportunity come in. Is that something, are these dates flexible? If not, understood. We'll ramp up our production, and that may mean a couple sleepless nights to appease both of those clients. And that's worked for me. At the same time, you want to avoid that. You want quality of life, but in-house, usually if your boss's boss is asking for something, they're usually good about saying, yeah, no, that makes sense. Work on the CEO's project first, and then circle back on what I asked you to work on. Or they may go and talk to the CEO and say, I know you're asking for this, but we have this initiative with this hard deadline, and is yours really the priority here, or you tell me. And here I am talking about how to be your boss's boss at this point, or something. But you get the idea, I hope. So yeah, your different clients. You've got C-level, your boss, the department you sit on. In my case, the marketing team. Which includes your core responsibilities. That's what you were hired to support, primarily. And then you may have, cross-departmental needs that are still super important to the success of the company, like sales team or product marketing team. They need you to work on this presentation or this proof of concept of an app, or a mock-up for how if they leverage our products and design, it'll help them. And those can be urgent for sure, and they are important. And early on at my current employer, that was something that kept me busy, and the salespeople were used to just coming last minute and saying, hey, this is a $1 trillion deal. If we can close this deal, we don't have to work another day in our life, all the promises, right? And so next thing you know, you're working nights and weekends to help get this thing done. But that's a fast, slippery road to burnout. Let me tell you. So what can you do? You want to ensure that those types of scenarios that those salespeople, that they have the resources they need. So something that's worked for me and for my team is a slide library. So a lot of times they're asking for specific slides. So for one thing, it's important to, narrow in on, this is how we talk about our products and services, and here's a slide library of 100 different slides that you, Mr. or Mrs. Salesperson, can pull from to create your deck of 10, 20 slides. And if you find that there's something missing from that slide deck, hey, guess what? We've got a request form, one of those briefs, creative briefs, that you can fill out, and we'll get that into the queue, and hopefully by the next time you're looking for something like this, we'll have it built. And so that's going to help a lot. And so it's kind of like training your people, getting the support from your boss, your peers, the leaders of those organizations, to help you out and set the standard, or go back to the beginning, the service level agreements. Set those expectations. All right. So those are some of the forms of clients. And then as we move lower down, there's those internal needs. Hey, we've got this party coming up for employees, and we need this piece of swag designed, a t-shirt or pendant or whatever. Or, hey, there's this new space we're opening up on the 3rd floor, and we'd like to create a wall wrap. Can you help design that? Those things are all good, but you better be darn sure that you're getting your other clients and their needs met first. Those things are important, and they need to be done. These kind of quality of life things for the good of the company. But they definitely, at most companies, in my experience, come a lot lower on the list. Your boss in the marketing department would rather see that you're helping him or her hit those pipeline numbers or whatever, as opposed to creating this cool t-shirt that people will wear once or use as a rag in their garage to check their oil. Who knows? Sad times. So that's an example of some of the clients. And just like in the real wild, wild west of consulting agency land out there, you've got your best clients, your clients that you want to take the most care of. They represent, a big majority of your income. And if you lose that client, you lose the faith and adoration of that client, then that's curtains for you and your company. It's going to be really hard to recover. Same thing in-house. You want to make sure you're taking care of those top clients. And then those lower tier clients, certain stages, even in-house, those things may get farmed out to contractors, or maybe it's good to set the expectation that we can't do custom swag items, or you create a template or some guidelines as to how they can use the logo and mock a piece of swag up themselves on a do-it-yourself, swag website, where it's like upload your logo, and then instead of you having to take the time and mock those up, they can do that and then submit it to you for final approval, ensure that it's on brand, that the logo isn't too big or oriented in a weird way, or whatever is important to ensure that your brand stays intact. So, in addition, we've talked about who the clients are and some ways to work with them, but there's this thing about saying no. If you're saying yes all the time, I've heard this, then you're saying no to something, because you only have a limited amount of time in the day, in a work week, in your life, whatever. And if you try to say yes to everything, you're saying no to something else. Maybe you're staying on top of everything, but you're saying no to spending the amount of time necessary on some of these other projects. But I would argue that when working in-house, you need to look at your clients once again and realize that in most cases, in my experience, it's not a good idea to tell the CEO no, or your direct boss no. Instead, we can say yes, but, or that's a good idea, Mr. CEO. I like that, and we will do everything we can to ensure that we meet or exceed your expectations in the time that we have allotted. But in this case, we don't have time to do X, but we can do Y, and then describe what that looks like. And to help illustrate this, I'll tell a little story from 2 or 3 years back when we were preparing for our company kickoff, and due to COVID, it was going to be all remote, and we were going all out. Bought everyone in the company their own pair of VR goggles, and not just the cheap Google Cardboard. These are the Oculus Quest 2 headsets that were brand new at the time. And we worked with a contractor to create this 3D world where all of our avatars, after being in lockdown for a year at this point, we were able to meet up. So this was early 2021, and there were rather than just having live presentations from executives in front of the company, they were all pre-recorded and needed to be all rendered into this 4 to 6 hour final video that could be timed and played at the right time on screens inside of this virtual world. So we needed time to get it to the vendors so that they could integrate it. There was a lot of dependencies, and it was a big undertaking. And the night before kickoff, the CEO went directly to my team member who was pulling together the video, this long 4 to 6 hour video that was going to take a good 6 hours to render on the machine he was using, and with everything that was going into it. And the CEO said, can you add this for me, create this new video essentially that he'd been iterating on up to the last minute. And this resource, this person on my team, out of frustration, just said, no, we can't. We're out of time. And suffice it to say, that was the wrong thing to say. The CEO escalated things to me and said, hey, what's the big idea? You guys can't get this done. I need it done. Or we'll just not do the whole thing. This is that important. And so I had to employ the yes but theory, where it was like, yeah, I totally understand the importance of this. I'm here for you. We'll do whatever it takes to ensure that you're able to present this message to the company and that it's delivered in a way that will be effective. And I said, I just calmly presented the scenario we're dealing with here. If we don't hit render on this thing, 4 hours from now, 2 hours from now, whatever it was at that point, then we were in danger of not being able to deliver. And all of this communication that's gone out to the entire company, put your headsets on at this time, be here, we're going to hit play, it's going to feel live to everyone else, was in jeopardy of not happening. And I said, so rather than creating this animation, iterating on it, rendering it, which we don't have time to do, because let's say we had 2 hours, that's going to take at minimum 6 hours. How about instead of animation, we use a series of still frames, so we're not rendering out 1,000 frames of this animation. Instead, we're able to render out 10 or whatever to get the idea across, and then put that to his talk track. And I said, and then we'll be able to hit render at the right time, and we'll be golden. Does that work for you? And he was like, yeah, no, that makes total sense. Let's do that. And boom, crisis averted. And so that's why I say, never say no to the CEO. Doesn't mean that you can't challenge the CEO's ideas or your bosses or the executives or a client. In fact, a lot of times that's what they're paying you for. They're always telling you, hey, we don't just want a yes man. And actually sometimes they do, but just kidding. But not. But yeah, so I feel strongly in that it's our jobs as creative leaders, in-house especially, to stay calm, understand the requirements, and then provide a solution in that given time. I have people, requesters, that have come to me over the years with last minute requests saying, or maybe they're not last minute, but they're just like, how long will this take? Can we do it? And based on the time that's left, it's like, ideally we'd like to spend 2 days on this, but we've got 2 hours. So I can give you the 2-hour version, and I will do that. So yes, I will do what you're asking, but it's the 2-hour version. So instead of, custom iconography, I'm pulling things from stock sources that may or may not even really fit very well the content, but that's your 2-hour version. So goes back to setting those expectations on the outset. If you know something needs to take 2 days and you've got 2 hours, you don't tell them, yeah, we'll do it, it's going to be the most amazing thing ever. You tell them, yeah, we'll do it, and we'll spin up all the resources we can, but it's going to be the 2-hour version. So, keep that in mind. So that's what I have to say about saying no. Push back on me, in the comments. Call me up, write me some hate mail, ike@ikeallred.com, whatever. I'd love to hear from you. Delegation. that's the next thing I'd like to talk about. So as a creative leader or a leader of people in general, you're going to need to delegate. You can't do it all yourself. And your people don't want to just be production artists. They don't want you to do all of the creative because you're the most senior or the most experienced, or have that authority and then just say, okay, execute on my vision. They want to own things. They want to be stretched to grow. And so delegation is essential. And I think it's important that as leaders, we don't just delegate the things that we don't want to do either, or the things that aren't important. That's not to say you give someone a super critical, highly visible, important project the second day they work for you and they're not proven yet. There's some baby steps to be taken there and some proving that needs to happen. But I always say, I'm not below doing anything. Just because I'm the head of this creative department doesn't mean that I'm above cranking on a Google Slides template and just, filling in text and creating assets inside of this tool that is not the funnest to design in. Or, if there's an ad that has already been designed and it just needs to be resized to these different formats, I'm not above that. I'm happy to take that on. And so I think it's important to share the love a little bit, and think about the long game with delegation. Another argument I hear from people all the time that are kind of making this transition into leadership, whether creative or otherwise, is they're like, yeah, I would have delegated that, but it was going to take twice as long and it would take me longer to explain it than I could just do it myself. And that's true. That is true. But you're investing in the future. You're investing in that person. You're investing in your team, in the capacity of your team. I mean, just because you start out, let's say you join an organization and you have a team of 4 creatives and your output is X, it doesn't mean that a year from then, 2 years from then, if you haven't grown your staff, your output is still the same. If you're challenging your people, if you're giving them opportunities to own things, to push themselves, to prove themselves, then their ability is going to increase, their ability to create things quickly, their ability to think critically and come up with good solutions. I mean, it's just like a muscle, or if you're training for a marathon, which I obviously don't have any experience in, but from what I've been told, you're working to shave off time. You may start out with your mile, in my case, like 15 minutes or 12 is really good for me, but those marathon runners, I mean, they be getting it down to like, I don't even want to say, it's scary, like a 4-minute mile for a marathon, which that used to be just like impossible for a freaking sprint. 4 minutes and some change. So you have someone who can run at that pace or work at that pace, and there's one human that's 3 times faster than my best time. It's the same thing with creatives. If you're delegating to these people and you're giving them the opportunities to grow, that team of 4 can produce what 12 people could normally produce, after they've trained and grown. Now, that doesn't mean you want to run your people at full speed at all times, but if you've got good people that you've trained, and I'm not taking the credit for it, I'm out there with the with the whip and making them do X amount of push-ups or whatever the design equivalent is. It's like you just give them that opportunity, and they realize the importance of executing and in a certain time frame and whatever, and they're surprising themselves and they're stretching themselves. It's not me or you, Mr. or Mrs. Ms. Creative Leader out there. So that's what I say about delegation. And this is for full-time people as well as contractors and agencies. You need to set that expectation for these contractors or agencies. Like if you just say, hey, here's this project, give it back to me when you're done. Next thing you know, they're giving you 8 different options. They spent 100 hours and you budgeted 10 hours and needed it in 2 days. That's not good, right? So again, back to the beginning, you set that expectation and you also ask for their commitment, like, hey, can you do this in X amount of time? This is what we're looking for. We have this much budget, so if that means we get one concept from you, then that's it. That's the scenario. Or if that means you can do 2 and we can choose what we like best and go from there, and we've got time for 1 or 2 rounds of revisions, great. That's the scenario we're dealing with. But we want to communicate that in the beginning, and over time they start to understand your pace, work at your pace, and realize that you're not just a pushover client that they can charge whatever they want and spin their wheels till the cows come home and buy their boat just based off of your lack of management. Anyways, tangent alert, apologize. But yeah, delegation, good stuff. And then the part of the job that as an individual contributor is someone who just loves to be doing the work, the part of the job that maybe, at least on paper, is the part that I resisted the most, and that is just the people management, the work that goes along with managing people, or managing the business, the non-creative side of things, whether it's maybe you're a freelancer and you've got to balance the budgets and send out the invoices and chase down people that aren't paying, or do some business development, get cringy and ask people to give you a chance or reach out to you if they hear anything or whatever. That part, the non-creative part, was the part I avoided. But the more I've done it as a necessary evil, if you will, the more I've started to appreciate it, especially on the people management side. You sit down one-on-one with someone on your team, and You get to learn about what makes them tick and where they're looking to go in their life, creative or professional or otherwise. And you get to share your experience with them, just like I'm doing in this podcast. Like, hey, I don't have all the answers. This worked for me. These are some resources you can look into. I'm pulling for you. I believe in you. That's easy to say, right? But it gets really hard when you're dealing with someone that you're not pulling for or you don't believe in, and you see the writing on the wall that this person isn't going to be here long term, and you're dreading that next scheduled one-on-one because that you've got this feeling that they're probably just not going to make it, and eventually you're going to have to let them go and jump through the necessary red tape to make all that happen. But you're hoping that you can tell them directly enough, that radical candor stuff. Read the book, lots of good stuff in there. Telling them like, hey, this is the expectation and you're not meeting it. And sometimes, if it were just this one thing, it's like, hey, we can live with that because you're doing amazing on all these other things. But a lot of times it's someone is just not meeting expectations on several things, and it's just painful. But that's part of the job, and you learn and you grow from it, and it never gets easy, but you do come to realize that you're not doing that person any favors. That ruinous empathy that is talked about in Radical Candor, where you just keep telling that person like, oh, you're doing great, yeah, whatever, just keep it up, because you don't want to sour your day with having to put them in their place or whatever. But instead you realize that you got to be real with that person and say, hey, this is where you're failing, and we need you to improve on these things in X amount of time, or this may not be a good fit, and that's no fun. But also don't do the compliment or the feedback sandwich or whatever, where you say, oh, you're doing good on this, you're not doing good on this, oh, but you're doing good on this, because that's just going to sneak on through, and that person isn't really going to digest that thing that they're not doing good on. You have to really hammer it home, say, hey, I like you as a person, you're good people, but this, the expectations here at this company are X, and you're not meeting them, and so how can I help you to remove any obstacles that are keeping you from being able to meet these expectations, and go from there. But don't sugarcoat it. And then just to kind of round out this whole people management thing, I've, as a creative who is in love with all disciplines, I've often called myself someone who suffers with creative ADD or creative ADHD, pick your poison. That desire to learn new things and be versed in web design, web development, animation, print design, branding, illustration, the list goes on and on, virtual production, whatever, by, musical production, whatever, by being curious and interested and actually trying to learn all of these different things, and definitely being better at some things than others, but by being a well-rounded creative or a generalist, I think that, in my opinion, makes for the best creative director of a team of multidiscipline specialists, because you're able to engage with those individuals on a higher level than just, hey, this is a black box to me, you do your thing, whatever. Instead, if it's web design and maybe, my skills are from 2008 when CSS was still relatively new and we weren't using these different frameworks that, make it more slick or whatever, but I'm able to contribute a little bit, like, open up the developer tools in Chrome and point out, like, oh yeah, could use a little more padding here, and using terms like padding as opposed to just white space. To a web designer / developer, they're gonna respond to that better because they're like, oh yeah, this person knows what they're talking about. But in the end, it's like, you're able to have that conversation, but you're also able to say, I respect you as the expert in this field, and I can hold you to a higher expectation because I know what's possible in print or in web or whatever, and so go and do it. And yeah, that's in a nutshell what it's like in-house being a creative leader. So let me know, is this something that you tuned out 2 minutes into the conversation, or was there anything that stood out to you that you didn't ever think about that maybe you want to leverage in your career moving forward? Or is there something I left out that you think needs to be plugged in here? Or is there a part of this discussion that deserves a full episode? I'm happy to bring in a guest or two and say, hey, let's hash this out. The people want to know, and I do expect that this is a topic that we'll revisit from time to time and get others' opinions on. So it's been fun. Thanks for sticking with me. Thanks for your support. Remember, check out CRE8.net. Check out the YouTube channel at CRE8, and specifically @ create or die if you want to get specific. But you'll recognize the logo when you see it, and you'll find it. There are links, I believe, from CRE8.net. Anyways, until next time, my friends, keep creating. Create or die.